Hello, this is Moses Jacobs for DeBarra Spoken Word with Nick Smith, also for DeBarra Spoken Word, and he's going to read his Ancestral Tales Part 2 to all of you. Nick, please take it away. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Moser. Good afternoon, everybody else, or good morning, or good night, depending on what time you're looking at. This is a piece called Ancestral Ammonites. Paleontology is the arm of geology that studies fossils, the remnants of creatures that once inhabited our planet, many of which no longer do so now, having become extinct, with no living trace other than their fossilized remains. My career as an erstwhile paleontologist began at the age of 8. Workmen, in their unwitting role as amateur geologists, had dug deep gullies for a new roadway through my home village in the English Midlands and had cut through several meters of Jurassic sandstone. When the workmen had finished for the day, I went exploring and discovered several stones of different sizes with regular shapes and hues. I brought them home, and my mother, subject to my persistent nagging, poor woman, later that week purchased a handbook on geology. Much to our astonishment, we found pictures of the ones I had found. They were called Gryphaea, a bivalved mollusc that existed between 35 and 200 million years ago. Well, you can imagine our excitement and wonder. The fossil that I am holding here is a sea creature, an ammonite that died out with the dinosaurs 240 to 265 million years ago. Can you imagine this once alive shellfish was living more than 200 million years ago? It makes our 200,000 years on the planet look just a little paltry. This particular specimen was found in a Jurassic escarpment in the Cotswold Hills in southwest of England. And I'll tell you why I find it appealing. Its shape, uniformity, and segmentation are for me a metaphor for the individual connectedness to our place in nature. Can you see the little segments here? All individual like their annular growth rings. It's for me a metaphor for the individual connectedness to our place in nature. In this present moment, we are encompassed by the past and buffered by the bow wave of a rapidly evolving future. I'm going to put that down because it's rather weighty. In all of this lies a central question. What have we inherited, and what shall we bequeath? My experience has shown me that we do not always know what we have inherited, but accept the superficial as the whole picture. So what was my inheritance? A 1950s Middle England, traditional lower middle class family. A stay-at-home mother who was a Trojan homemaker. My father was a distant figure. A conscientious objector during the war, he angrily wielded a sword of religion and carried pretensions of grandeur. He sported a bowler hat and heightened demeanour of superiority as a lowly insurance clerk with a routine to match. 9 to 5 daily for 30 years, 2 weeks annual holiday, and death within a year of retirement. I understand now, with the benefit of hindsight, some of the burden he carried and how he had tried to redeem himself, balancing a zany sense of humour with explosive outbursts which occurred at random and sent us scuffling for cover. Whatever it was he was carrying, he bore with the enthusiasm of a religious zealot, worshipping religion and the hope of a salvation that may have lurked therein. So what had he inherited? Well, his father was a distant, pipe-smoking Wesleyan minister, insular, benign, smelling of pipe tobacco and sermons. His wife, a true contemporary feminist, spoke in London's Royal Albert Hall on temperance and the vices of drink. She formed women's groups where they discussed steely matters of female revolution and appropriate feminine deportment. My father, who admitted to being an irascible child, was sent to boarding school at the age of 7 due to his parents' inability to manage his uncontrollable behaviour. His occupations on leaving school at the outbreak of the Second World War were variously machine tool operator, a herdsman, a housemaster at an agricultural training colony for abandoned youths, finally an insurance clerk, and then a self-professed preacher and faith healer. I thought I was the rebel and strove to break away from my parents' expectations, yet I too unknowingly accepted their mantle. 7 years working in the same insurance company, 2 years before the seminarian mast, before I saw the light. 3 years working as a house parent in a residential children's home. Sound familiar? Finally, 5 years as a qualified social worker. Almost identical steps as my father. Such is the subconscious call of familial loyalty. I'm still waiting to become a preacher. My move to Ireland in 1985 saw an end to all of my previous occupations, for there were no openings anywhere. This was recessive Ireland, with Charlie Haughey purchasing French shirts whilst preaching austerity, who between 1984 and 1992 received allowances of over £1 million. What chance I of blowing? But favourable winds kept me off the rocks. I began to make small pieces of furniture, which sold with some success, converted the barns of our old house to workshops, and over the next 25 years or so, built up a prestigious business designing and making bespoke furniture, the learning of which felt strangely second nature. My mother, watching me work one time and examining a finished piece, asked, "But where did you learn how to do all this?" At the time, I didn't know, but it all felt so natural, as I'd been apprenticed. It was only after her death several years later that I received a complex family tree from a relative who traced our lineage back to 1832. Our part of the story began in Sandiacre, Derbyshire. My forebears, according to parish records, were saddle makers and alehouse keepers, which perhaps explains Grandma's abhorrence of alcohol. From then on, more saddle and tack makers, lace makers, weavers, wheelwrights, carpenters, cabinet makers, undertakers, an endless list of skilled artisan workers. All this seems to have become overtaken by the Victorian age of respectability, when the line of the craft worker seemed to be nipped in the bud. So what happened in my grandparents' lineage that caused a sudden subservience to religion? Was there, I have pondered, some heinous skeleton of guilt or shame lurking in some dusty cupboard that demanded atonement? For this was a capitulation to the years of artisan workers of whom we knew so little, swept away apparently by the heavy brush of respectable self-righteousness. But what were they hiding? Okay, at last I finally understood the origins of my creativity, of which I had been totally oblivious, and which had been unearthed like some latter-day fossil, a segment falling into place. Inherited physical characteristics are easily identifiable, but I believe that our inheritance runs much deeper than that, even into the bedrock of our very spirituality. So as with fossils, I don't believe anything is lost, but is laid down, latent, just waiting to be unearthed for our expression and fulfillment. My little bit of advice: if you feel the urge to do something out of character, go explore, see what you unearth, and don't worry about the skeletons. Thank you very much, Mr. Ammonite, for your experience.
Thank you, Nick, for this advice. You might turn into a preacher after all. Writers are.
God forbid.
Okay, thank you and good day.
Thank you, Rosa. Yeah,
bye-bye.
thanks everyone else. Take care. Bye.